Yes, indeed, the Jim and Terry Show without Jim in the Hobbit Hole for one more session. He will be back with us this week. Catch up on all things, looking back 2024, looking ahead 2025, not Project 2025, the year 2025. And speaking of looking forward, it's always good to be reminded of what really has transpired in the past. As I mentioned in a previous podcast, revisionism is running amok. It is the ability of some, especially on the right and far right, to spin and reinterpret events that really happen. I mentioned in a Zelensky-Lex Friedman interview that Zelensky was challenging Friedman's interpretation of both sides-ism. Both Ukraine and Russia have something to bear in terms of responsibility for the terrible things that have happened in the past over 3 years, approaching the fourth year, 2025. What is going on? So, revisionism is the ability to reinterpret, to revisit things and say, that didn't happen that way. Yes, it did. Liz Cheney telling Trump, bring it on, Trump. Because what happened on January 6th is what happened. We have the goods, we have the receipts, and we already proved it in an impeachment of President Trump, President-elect Trump, not president until January 20th. In the meantime, there is a January 10th court date. I think he has to appear in New York for the sentencing of his 34 counts. So let's see what happens there. Revisionism is the dangerous play, spin, propaganda in which we reinterpret what we all saw and what we all heard, whether that's from the convoy in Ottawa in Canada's case, or it's from the January 6th insurrection. Over 1,000 people have been charged and incarcerated. So it's worth looking at because Trump has promised he's going to pardon all the January 6th party goers. They were just having a picnic. Good old boys. Good old boys, proud boys. Good old proud boys. If that doesn't make your hair curl and stand on end, then I guess the white pointy hats of the KKK wouldn't do that either. Stuff is going on, and we need to be aware of it. Not that I'm sounding the alarms and saying the sky is falling, but please don't go back and reinterpret things and say that never happened. And I'm reminded of conversations I've had with people who support the old ancient orange. Yeah, he's going to be the oldest serving president, I think. Who say, yeah, he never said that he could solve the Russian invasion of Ukraine. He never said that he would do that on the day he was voted in. He said when he took power. And no, you go back and look at the debate between Trump and Kamala Harris, and he said it, we all heard it, we all saw it. So words matter, character matters. Trump is a proven, demonstrable liar, but that doesn't seem to matter to even devout Christians. It doesn't matter. Neither do the convictions matter because, after all, it was a setup. Biden crime family organized the DOJ and weaponized it and took it out, so the court case doesn't matter at all. And Trump's going to write that whole debacle. Well, in light of revisionism, let's go back and look at things that really should scare us. And I'm referring to an article in the BBC that talked about fact-checking RFK Jr. And what does he say? And I'm going to start with a clip from Majority Report Sam Sater. Here we go.
These are assertions that Kennedy is making in defense of, this is ostensibly, this hearing was about misinformation. And so they brought in, about censorship. Yeah. And Kennedy here is making the argument that he was censored for providing the following facts and truth. And so he's going to go through this. And these are things that he's been repeating across wherever opportunity he has. I want you to listen to these things. It's really fascinating to me, because obviously, like, you know, I had a relationship with Kennedy. I mean, I may still, I don't know. But he lays this stuff out, and it sounds really believable, what he's saying. It sounds really believable. And all I can tell you is that, like, you know, I think for him, this is an article of faith in the same way that a religious preacher will go on and talk about these, you know, this and that. But
Well
it's easier
said.
for us who don't subscribe to religion to say, like, you know what, there isn't necessarily a big guy in the, or, you know, God didn't get mad at the gays and then send tornadoes somewhere. But this is the same. The only explanation I have for this is the same thing. These are articles of faith for him. He sees these facts and figures somewhere, I don't know where, and gloms onto them and repeats them with an incredible amount of confidence. He's a very smart person. Listen to this stuff, and then we're going to play something that I found from a Twitter person. Go ahead.
And in fact, the term misinformation did not denote falsehood or veracity. Rather, it was a euphemism for any information that departed from government orthodoxies. And it is very dangerous. And, you know, the congressman a minute ago said 1 million people have died because of misinformation about vaccines in this country. But in fact, our country had the worst, had one of the highest vaccination rates in the world and the worst health outcomes. We have 4.2% of the global population. We had 16% of the COVID deaths. Blacks in Haiti with a 1% vaccination rate were dying at a rate of 15 per million population. And same in Nigeria, had a 1.3 vaccination rate. They were dying at 1 in 14 per million population, 14 per million population. In our country, blacks were dying at 3,000 per million population, 200 times the death rates in other countries. And this holds throughout the world. We needed information. We should have all been sharing information openly and talking to the 15 million doctors through the internet who were treating patients on the front line all over the world and channeling the best therapies, the most successful treatments, so that we can all figure
All right,
out.
pause it there. Okay. And yes, we should be doing that where doctors throughout the world are sharing. They were. They were doing that. I mean, we have, throughout COVID, we spoke to various epidemiologists and to people who've been on the front lines of this. Mark Elaine Derry, literally like a prime example of one of those people. He was involved in the Ebola stuff. He had worked in Africa. He's in constant communication. No relationship to the pharmaceutical industry whatsoever. A very progressive lefty type of guy, and so that the last part was happening, but the stuff about Nigeria, the stuff about Haiti, as it goes by you quickly, you go, wow, those are what's going on with those numbers. And if you say that, like, we had, in fact, he said our country had one of the worst outcomes. Here is a Twitter user called The Real Truther. This is clip number 4. Yeah, go ahead.
Many in your party who will argue that vaccines work. They took a crisis and seriously cut down the deaths that would have been a lot higher without it, you say?
I would disagree with you on that. I don't think the science supports that. I don't think you can show me any scientific study that shows that.
There's literally thousands of studies from around the world that prove the vaccines reduce hospitalizations and deaths.
There's a direct correlation between excess deaths. The deaths in the nations that heavily vaccinated, which were much higher than those that didn't.
If we look at 2021 excess mortality, the gold standard in comparison, we can see the highest vaccinated countries have the lowest excess deaths and the lowest vaccinated countries have the highest. If we combine 2021 and 2022, we see a similar correlation with Bulgaria with the lowest vaccine rates in Europe all the way on the left and Sweden all the way on the right. Speaking of Sweden, we can see 86% of adults vaccinated with the highest booster rate in Europe and the lowest excess since vaccination with negative excess in 18 to 44-year-olds. When we look at the U.S., it's similar with the 10 most vaccinated states having the lowest excess since vaccines were widely available and the 10 least vaccinated states having the highest.
The nations that didn't vaccinate had the lowest death rate. For example, Nigeria had a 1.5 vaccination rate, and it had a 14 deaths per million population.
This is just outright dishonest misinformation. Africa has the youngest population of any continent with a median age of 18. In Nigeria, only 3% of their population is over 65. They don't test and they don't report excess deaths at all.
Well, there you have it. A whole bunch on RFK Jr., his claims, all of this. I provide links in the description, links to the BBC article debunking RFK Jr.'s claims, and the links to the counter arguments presented in the other podcast. So what does it all mean? It all means be careful about your choices. Be careful about who you believe. Be careful about why you believe what you believe. And if you can't back it all up with evidence, then perhaps we shouldn't be saying it. So a final word. In summary, beware and find out. Not by watching YouTube videos, by reading books, by following the news, by looking at vetted journalists, by looking at scientists, not anti-scientists, not pseudo-scientists. Follow the truth in data. Data doesn't lie. The spin can make your head spin. Are we talking about some form of The Exorcist? Not that I'm saying RFK Jr. is possessed or anything, but he says stuff that makes my head spin. The Jim and Terry Show signing off. Bye-bye.